It was one of those cold winter mornings in Cincinnati when the wind seemed to pierce right through the heart. The streets were wet with last night's rain, and people walked fast, collars turned up, eager to escape the chill. Inside a small corner pharmacy on Maple Avenue, the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of antiseptic filled the air. Behind the counter, the pharmacist sorted pills and bottles with quiet efficiency. The bell above the door chimed faintly, and a young woman stepped in, clutching a folded prescription with trembling hands. Her name was Emily Parker, 28 years old, a single mother, and a waitress at a downtown diner. Her brown hair framed a face that had once been full of laughter, but now showed lines of quiet struggle. Her clothes were clean but worn, and her shoes had long lost their shine. In her purse, she had a few crumpled dollar bills, her entire savings after paying rent and utilities. The doctor had prescribed medicine for her little boy, Ethan, who had been battling a severe respiratory infection for over a week. He was only 6, too young to understand why his mother was crying silently each night when he coughed himself to sleep. Emily had come to the pharmacy hoping, praying, that she could somehow afford the medicine. As she handed the prescription to the pharmacist, her heart raced. She tried to smile politely, but her fingers were shaking. The woman behind the counter, Martha, scanned the prescription, typed a few keys, and said the words Emily feared most. "That'll be $128.50. It felt like a blow to her chest. Emily's smile faltered. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked down, pretending to search her purse, even though she already knew what was inside. Just $11.25, and a few coins. Her vision blurred as her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, almost to herself, I don't have enough." The pharmacist gave a sympathetic nod, the kind people give when they want to help but can't. The silence between them grew heavy. Behind her, the sound of the line shifting filled the air. Impatient customers waiting for their turn. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and compassion that still exists in this world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us share more stories that restore faith in humanity. Emily's chest tightened as she clutched the prescription box that Martha had placed on the counter. For a moment, she considered putting it back. She could wait. Maybe Ethan would get better on his own. But she knew deep inside that wasn't true. He was getting worse, coughing until his lips turned pale. She felt utterly helpless. She thought about calling her boss, maybe asking for an advance again, but she had already done that last week. Her parents were gone, her friends were struggling just like her, and she couldn't bear the thought of borrowing again. Then came the voice. A calm, steady, warm voice that cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Put it on my bill," the man behind her said. Emily froze. She slowly turned around. Behind her stood a tall man, probably in his early 40s. He had dark brown hair, neatly trimmed, and gentle eyes that seemed to hold both strength and kindness. He wore a dark coat over a blue sweater, and his expression wasn't one of pity. It was pure compassion. He nodded toward the pharmacist, repeating, "I'll pay for it. Put it on my bill." Emily's mouth opened, but words wouldn't come. She felt embarrassed, confused, grateful, all at once. "No, I can't let you do that," she stammered. But the man just smiled softly and said, "It's okay. Someone helped me once, too. Let me do this." Martha looked between them, waiting for confirmation. Emily's hands trembled as she held the medicine. Finally, she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. The pharmacist rang it up, and the man pulled out his card, tapping it on the reader without hesitation. The sound of the approved transaction was small, but in that moment, it echoed like a miracle. When Emily finally found her voice, all she could whisper was, "Thank you." The man just smiled and said, "Take care of your boy." Then he turned to leave, as quietly as he had stepped in. Emily wanted to stop him, to ask for his name, to somehow repay him someday. But before she could, the door chimed again, and he was gone. She ran to the window, her hand still holding the small white bag. Outside, she caught one last glimpse of him walking down the snowy sidewalk, hands in his pockets, disappearing into the winter morning. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt hope. She didn't know why a stranger would care so much, but she felt something change deep within her heart. She held the medicine close to her chest, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude. That night, after giving Ethan his medicine, she sat by his bed, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in days. The faint sound of his steady breathing brought tears of relief to her eyes. She brushed his hair back, whispering, "You're going to be okay, baby." The next few days passed quietly. Ethan's health improved, and Emily found herself thinking about that man more and more. Who was he? What kind of person just steps forward like that? Maybe, she thought, he had lost someone once. Maybe he knew what desperation felt like. One afternoon, as she finished her shift at the diner, she saw a familiar face at one of the corner tables. It was him. He was sitting with a cup of coffee, reading something on his phone. Emily froze. Her first instinct was to turn around and walk away. She didn't want him to think she had come to thank him out of obligation. But then she remembered the kindness in his eyes, and she took a deep breath. She walked over to his table and softly said, "Excuse me, you probably don't remember me." He looked up immediately and smiled. "Of course I do." "The pharmacy, right?" She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I wanted to thank you again. My son's better now because of you." He set his phone down and gestured for her to sit. "I'm glad he's okay," he said. "Sometimes, a little help goes a long way." Emily sat across from him, feeling both nervous and calm at the same time. "You didn't even know me," she said quietly. "Why did you help me?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Because once, I was in your place. My wife was sick. I couldn't afford her treatment back then. A stranger helped me pay for her medicine. She didn't survive, but that moment changed my life. Since then, I promised myself, I'll help whenever I can." Emily's eyes filled again, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was the kind of emotion that makes your chest ache because it's too full of gratitude. "You're a good man," she said. He smiled faintly and looked out the window. "Just trying to be," he replied. "Name's Daniel, by the way." From that day forward, Emily often saw Daniel at the diner. Sometimes he'd drop by for lunch, sometimes just for coffee. They talked about simple things, books, music, her son, his work at a local construction firm. There was no grand romance, no dramatic confessions, just two kind souls finding peace in each other's company. One snowy afternoon, Ethan came to the diner after school. Daniel was there, sitting at his usual spot. Emily introduced them, and Daniel smiled warmly, ruffling the boy's hair. "So you're the superhero I heard about," Daniel said jokingly. Ethan grinned shyly. "Mom says you saved me." Daniel laughed softly. "No, buddy. Your mom saved you. I just helped a little." That simple friendship grew naturally. Daniel often brought Ethan small gifts, a toy car, a book, or sometimes just candy from the corner store. He never made Emily feel indebted, never treated her with pity. Instead, he treated her with respect, as if she was someone who mattered. And to Emily, that meant more than anything. Months passed. The world kept spinning. But one spring evening, as the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily realized something. Her heart wasn't heavy anymore. She wasn't just surviving. She was starting to live again. The kindness of one man had reminded her that goodness still existed in a world that often felt cold. A year later, Emily stood outside the same pharmacy holding Ethan's hand. They were there to buy vitamins this time, and Ethan insisted on paying with the allowance he had saved. As they walked in, she smiled at the familiar scent of the store and the quiet hum of the lights. When they reached the counter, Ethan placed the vitamins down and proudly said, "We'll pay for it." The cashier smiled as she rang it up, and then, out of the corner of her eye, Emily noticed a young woman standing behind them, tears in her eyes, clutching a prescription, whispering, "I don't have enough." Emily froze. For a brief second, she saw her own reflection in that woman, the same fear, the same helplessness. She looked down at Ethan, who was watching quietly, and before she could think twice, she turned to the pharmacist and said, softly but firmly, "Put it on my bill." The woman gasped, covering her mouth in disbelief, and Emily smiled gently, her eyes misty. "Someone once did the same for me," she said. "Now it's my turn." Outside, the sunlight broke through the clouds, and a warm breeze swept across the street. Emily held Ethan's hand tighter, feeling his little fingers squeeze back. She knew Daniel would have been proud. Maybe he was watching somewhere, smiling. Sometimes kindness doesn't need to be repaid. It just needs to be passed on. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. And if you believe that one act of kindness can change a life, please subscribe to our channel to hear more stories that remind us of the beauty of humanity. Comment below. Kindness never fades. If you believe small gestures can create miracles.